Pint Glass Football. I'm your host, Brad Fowler. What's up, PGF Nation? Season 7 kicks off today, and it's April. It's time. That means it's officially NFL draft season. We're starting with the most important position on the field, the quarterbacks. We're going to break down our top quarterback prospects in this draft, giving you all the pros and cons of each one of these guys. But before we dig in, I want to welcome any new listeners to the show. Season 7, first episode of the year. So I wanted to introduce you guys that might not know who we are. I'm Brad Fowler, creative director and host of Pint Glass Football. I'm from the Pacific Northwest. I've been covering the NFL and college football since 2019. I'm an Eddie Robinson Coach of the Year voter. I also help nominate players for the College Football All-American Team, Outland Trophy, and the Bronco Nagurski Trophy. And joining me, as always, once again, for the third season in a row here, my co-host Alex Higdon, originally from New York City. Alex has over a decade of experience working in professional sports, including the NBA. He's also made his mark in the music industry, working with multiple platinum-selling artists in major record labels. And before teaming up with me on Pint Glass Football, Alex was the host of a top-ranked podcast that covered everything from politics and pop culture to music and, of course, sports. And we've got some exciting news. We've now joined the Radcast Network. This is the first season with them. This partnership is going to be awesome. It's going to make the show even better, bringing you guys more content, better production, and helping us reach even more football fans. Alex, what is going on, man? Season 7.
Yeah, man. You know what? We'd be remiss if we didn't also thank the original listeners, because without them, we wouldn't get to the heights that we're getting to now. So a lot of the original day one listeners, you guys are part of the growth of this podcast.
Man, absolutely. I'm glad that you said that. And look, for all you new listeners, obviously you might have heard me say it, PGF Nation, that's what we call you guys, the guys who have been following the show, listening to the show for years. We love each and every one of you guys. We're excited to have you guys back, excited to have some new listeners as well, of course. And I hope you guys continue to support the show, like, retweet, subscribe, all that good stuff. The pintglassfootball.com website, of course, the newsletter. We seriously love all the support. Couldn't do it without you guys. But Alex, let's jump into this. It's time to break down our top 5 quarterbacks in this draft class. The first two guys at the top seem pretty consensus, but give me your number one quarterback in this class.
My number one quarterback in this class is Cam Ward. Everything that I've seen from him on and off the field, the guy is an absolute dog, which is the number one thing I love about him. I'm not saying that's the number one thing that you look for in a quarterback, but it's the fact that he has that dog in him. He's in complete contrast to Shedeur, where he had to get it out of the mud. Brad, you have to take that victory lap because you were the guy talking about him when he left Washington, that he was going to be a guy when he went to Miami because you were on it from the beginning. Once you tell me what you think about Cam Ward, I think we'll probably have some critiques of him, but that guy is a dog, and I think he has the bigger ceiling over Shedeur.
Look, no surprise here. Cam Ward and Shedeur, number 1 and 2. Here's where I might surprise you guys. Cam Ward's my number 2 quarterback. And I know that's not a popular opinion right now because it seems like the consensus is Cam Ward for a lot of reasons you just said, Alex. And I'll jump into some of those things right now. Big arm, impressive velocity, has a lot of the traits that you're looking for. Excellent athleticism, ability to extend plays and make big gains with his legs, but he also extends plays to make big plays down the field. Now, kind of has that unorthodox sidearm release. I don't love that about his throwing style, but he can make all the throws and he can throw off platform really effectively. So, a lot to like there. I think he has a lot of natural touch as a passer, especially in that intermediate range, can really dial it in from that area. I love the poise, the confidence, plays with a swagger, like you said, a dog mentality. I love that about him. Makes a lot of big plays in big moments. I absolutely understand why people are so high on this guy, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and you know what, to be fair, I wouldn't say high. So let me just take a step back. If you take Cam Ward and put him in last year's draft, he's probably 5th, going behind Caleb, Jaden, Drake, Penix, and Bo Nix. So he's probably 6th, maybe 5th, depending on how you feel about Bo Nix. So let's be clear. I'm not saying that this is in any way, shape, or form compared to the last draft. But if we're just simply talking about this draft right here, then for this, he is the consensus player for me as the number one quarterback in the draft.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I couldn't agree with you more. Like, I like Cam Ward, but I think in most drafts, especially in a good quarterback draft like last year, you're absolutely right. This guy probably more than likely falls into the second round and probably ends up being a good value pick at that point. At number 1 overall, which is probably what he's going to end up, he's kind of a boomer bust prospect. And that's the reason that I actually slid him just down below Sanders, and I'll get into Sanders' tape here in a second here. Now, don't get me wrong. When I'm looking at the pros and cons, there's more pros to Cam Ward than there are cons. And I mentioned some of them. I mean, I love how he keeps his eyes downfield when he escapes the pocket. It just has that ability to dissect zone coverage. He carves up zone at a really high level. He has that gunslinger mentality with the potential to just make those jaw-dropping throws. So as far as the traits and the ceiling, there's no doubt about it. Cam Ward has the highest ceiling of any of these quarterbacks because if he puts it all together to the next level, he could really be a special player. But there's definitely some glaring holes here. Ball security issues, I think, are a serious concern. He can be really reckless with the football, including 8 fumbles last season. Part of that is because when he scrambles around, he tends to hold the ball away from his body, things that are going to make coaches cringe. And he's really prone to making risky decisions, throwing into really tight windows, trying to force balls into traffic. Like I said, a boomer bust prospect for me because I absolutely could see this guy putting it together, but I could also see it not working at the next level.
Yeah, I can see that as well. And boy, are we going to get in trouble with this boomer bust take that we have. If you know, you know. If you don't know, you should listen to last year's draft quarterback recap, and you'll know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I can see that with Cam Ward as well. I feel what you're feeling in terms of this is going to be dependent upon where he goes.
Yeah, now let's get to my number 1 quarterback. And look, I understand that I am not in the majority here and that most analysts do not have Shedeur Sanders number 1. But when I really started looking at the tape and really started studying this guy's game, now granted, I watch a lot of college football, as you guys know. I've watched him play several times, but you always got to go back and watch closer when you start doing the NFL draft evaluations. You kind of have to watch through a different lens than just on Saturday. When it turns into the draft, you start kind of nitpicking these guys' games. You start kind of looking at individual throws and individual certain situations and start really kind of making your assessments. What I really love about Shedeur Sanders is the timing, anticipation, and rhythm he shows as a passer is excellent. I really love the touch, the poise, the accuracy, really, really accurate passer. You know, you talked about something that is absolutely valid, how Cam Ward was a guy who really had to come from nowhere, had to take the small school route, transfer to Washington State, and then to Miami before he really got on the national radar. He had to kind of fight and claw his way to the position he's in now. Shedeur Sanders, obviously being the son of Deion, had a little more of a red carpet treatment, no doubt about it. But I will say this is a guy that played at Jackson State in Colorado, and he was the biggest catalyst for turning those programs around, especially when you look at Colorado. You're talking about maybe the worst Power 5 school in the country before he showed up. Now, I'm not taking anything away from Deion and what he did to change that program, but I think Shedeur played a huge role when it comes to turning Colorado into a winning program, played behind a terrible offensive line. And man, when I went back and watched some of these games, Alex, it was crazy how bad that O-line was. 0 run game to help him out. No tight end. A very vanilla, very outdated offense. It was obvious he had no protection at all. It's actually kind of amazing that he had the college career he had with what was around him.
I believe he is the most pro-ready right this moment to go in and play to the points that you made. His bootleg ability, if you get him outside and being able to throw on the run, whether it be left or to the right, that he doesn't have the biggest arm. We're not talking about John Elway in terms of arm strength or Brett Favre arm strength, but pinpoint accuracy. He throws a beautiful spiral, easy to catch. Most of you may think, well, what does that mean? Ask any wide receiver. The wide receiver will tell you about even catching a ball from a left-handed quarterback versus a right-handed quarterback. Just ask Jerry Rice. But the ability that it lands right in place, you'll catch it. The receiver can catch it in stride, obviously, if everything is going perfect. So whether he's running left or bootlegging left or bootlegging right, I think you're going to see a lot of nice, beautiful, timely throws that are going to work. But in terms of the things that I didn't like about Shedeur, he holds on to that ball entirely entirely too long. And he has a tendency of things that I actually criticized Caleb Williams about last year is always looking for the big play. Like you mentioned, to his credit, he overcame not having a run game. Well, in the NFL, you're going to have some semblance of the run game that you're going to have to trust. You're also going to have that outlet of a running back that you're going to have to trust as well. And more than likely, depending upon where he goes, he'll also have a tight end, so he won't need to be looking down the field at that third level all the time. It'll be a lot of first and second level throws that I believe he's going to have to get accustomed to, where you'll have that adjustment period where he's going to, his eyes are going to be looking downfield and trying to make a big play, which is where he gets himself in trouble the most, because I don't want to say he doesn't have athleticism. He's not as athletic or in terms of mobile as a Cam Ward. He tends to drift backwards and will not throw the ball away and will take a lot of big sacks that are past 10, sometimes 15 to 20-yard losses because he's trying to make a play as opposed to throwing the ball away and living another down.
I saw the same thing on tape. Absolutely. He's got to speed that clock up. And I think that's something with coaching. And look, he's hearing this for sure. I think he's been hearing this all off season. I'm sure scouts, coaches, and everybody in between has been telling him, look, these are the things you need to work on. And I'm sure he is, as we speak, going over the tape himself and looking at the things he's got to do better. He's a very smart player. I mean, very high football IQ, takes care of the football, shows impressive toughness, because you're right. Sometimes he hangs on to it too long. Absolutely a fair critique. But I love how he stands tall in the pocket and delivers even under pressure. That is something that really jumps out to me, because at the NFL level, on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, you have to be able to do that in the NFL, and he does it at a high level. I mean, he is ice cold under pressure. Great pocket mobility, because look, we talked about he's not a great athlete. He's not an elite runner. He has decent mobility, but I'm talking about pocket mobility. He really maneuvers well in the pocket to elude the rush, buy time, sidestep from a defender, buy himself an extra second to fire the ball. Best mechanics of any quarterback in this draft. Really nice, compact release. Like you said, throws a beautiful spiral. I think he has an advanced understanding of defensive schemes and has elite decision making. Those are some of the things of why I pushed him up number 1, because I think Cam Ward has more traits. I think Cam Ward clearly has more upside, but I think Shedeur, to your point, is so much more pro ready. You can tell when you watch Shedeur Sanders, he has been very well coached, really understands the game at a high level for a young quarterback. And I love how he throws his receivers open, which is another thing you have to be able to do at the next level. You have to throw with accuracy and anticipation, and he does that as well as anybody in this class.
Before we move on, Brad, I just want to say one thing. There's a lot of stuff in the media about this kid that has nothing to do with what's going on the field. Let's be very, very clear. This is no different than any other kid whose father was a guy or the guy, because there's a difference between being a guy and the guy. Deion Sanders is the standard for most cornerbacks. That's why you see no different than you see a lot of people wearing 23 for Mike. There's a lot of cornerbacks that wear 21 for Deion. What would you expect a child raised by Deion to look, act, and sound like? So to diminish what he has put on film because you don't like his confidence that you're calling a little bit of arrogance, I don't think it's cocky. I think it's confidence. The fact that you don't understand the confidence that he has within himself to grow up under the roof, to grow up as his father as the coach at every single level throughout his entire life. And now that his father took him from Jackson State, he was, like you said, Brad, in the beginning, he was part of turning around that entire school. And he goes to Colorado. They are up 285% in attendance over the past 2 years. Their enrollment is up 50% for African-American kids. Their TV ratings are up 3.5%. Enrollment as a whole is up 20%. That's the Deion and Shedeur effect. And he's played in the biggest games that he's played in his life under his father's tutelage, with everybody knowing that that's the guy's son. So if you want to talk about pressure and ability to perform, and if your franchise is in the dumpster and you need somebody to come in and turn it around, who better than the guy that's done it at not only 1, but 2 schools?
Now, before we move on to the rest of our list here, it's clear, and I think we agree, even though our 1 and 2 quarterbacks are flip-flopped, this is clearly tier 1, these 2 guys. And after you get past tier 1 with these quarterbacks, there's a big drop off. I actually have a late first, early second round grade on these two quarterbacks. And we both know they're not going to go late first, early second. That's the quarterback tax that you hear people talk about. That's the cost of doing business when you're talking about quarterback prospects. They're always going to get pushed up higher. In this case, much higher, all the way to probably top 3 picks for these guys. More than likely, I know there's some rumors about Shedeur sliding. I don't buy it. We'll get into that another day. But these guys are going to get drafted high. I think that much we know. And they're probably going to get overdrafted because they're not in a great quarterback class. So once we break down our 3, 4, and 5 quarterbacks, I just want to preface that by saying these next guys, they all have upside, they all have potential, but there's a lot more holes and a lot more red flags with these next tier of guys.
So with that being said, and here's where you'll probably hear a lot of disagreement between me and Brad. At number 3, I have Quinn Ewers. And the reason I have Quinn Ewers, he's a gunslinger. So listen, the tape tells us exactly who he is, without a doubt. He's probably got if not the best arm, he's probably got the second best arm in the draft, depending on how you feel about Milroe and his deep ball in terms of arm strength. However, what he has put on tape has shown that he can be reckless with the football. He's gonna do a lot of those things you see Steve Kerr doing the sideline when Steph Curry's taking wild threes. Some he's gonna miss. Some he's going to hit. You'll cheer when he makes a great play, and you're going to miss and say, what are you doing when he throws that bad interception? However, the reason I have him at number 3 is simply because of what I saw and where the league is going, and when I saw Sean McVay trade for Matthew Stafford. He traded for Matthew Stafford that Super Bowl year. The reason that Sean McVay moved away from Jared Goff because he wasn't taking the chances and trusting himself in those critical situations where Sean McVay thought there was a play to be made, and enter Matthew Stafford, and he does those. However, as he did those, again, led the league in 17 interceptions. If I'm not mistaken, he also had 7 of those returned for touchdowns. And looking at Quinn Ewers, he fits that mold of that type of gunslinger quarterback. Biggest knock I have on him is his injury history. However, putting that aside now, just looking at what he's put on tape, it's really going to be his gunslinger mentality. Now, the league is moving to Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay and on down. The league is filling up with these type of guys. I take the chance on that guy, putting him in offense and having him be successful, because you'll be putting him in an offense to maximize his skill set and that strong arm. My comp is not necessarily Matthew Stafford. It is Matthew Stafford-esque, if that makes sense. Again, providing the health part. He's been hurt the last 2, 23 and 24, but he's put up the numbers. He's shown that he's capable of making any throw on the field with that huge arm, and that's why I like him. He does have mobility, but mobility is part of the problem. He's been injured in those moments, but that's the reason that I know I'm shocking Brad when I have him there, but that's the reason. Looking at where the league is going, the type of offenses that are being implemented, he fits that style, and that's why I have him at number 3.
There's a lot to like about Quinn Ewers. I don't have him nearly as high, but like I said, this next group of quarterbacks is really hard to dissect. Because like I said a minute ago, there's so many red flags with each one of these guys. You kind of have to pick which ones you like more than others. Like, do their pros outweigh their cons, and how just kind of your preference and who, what you like in a quarterback. The arm talent, off the charts, no doubt about it. The ball jumps off his hand. Just the flick of the wrist can really spin it. So the talent is absolutely there. There's just a lot of other parts of his game that kind of leave me scratching my head. The mechanics, he gets really sloppy with his footwork and his mechanics. The inconsistencies are really alarming, because like you see flashes of what you're talking about where you're like, wow, this guy can really uncork it and make some wow throws. But then you also have to look at, like, one glaring hole for me, or I should say red flag for me, was this guy had a ton of talent around him. You could make a case that Texas had maybe the most talented roster in college football the last 2 years, but yet he was very hot and cold and really didn't actually live up to what we thought he would. If you look at his tape 2 years ago to last year, it's like he took a step back. And I think part of that was probably injuries, but part of it was just not taking the step that I think a lot of us thought he would. And I thought going into last season, I thought this was a guy that was going to be a lock to be a top 10 pick because he would take that next step. I actually think he took a step backwards. There's a lot to like, but there's also a lot to clean up. You know, he's not very good in the pocket. He gets kind of antsy in the pocket, and he's not very good under pressure. You get a guy rushing him, his mechanics and his accuracy really fall off. Definitely some upside here, don't get me wrong, but a lot of red flags for me with Quinn Ewers.
And there's a lot of bad tape out there, but I believe with good coaching you can clean up. And again, I'm just relating to people that had some of these similar issues. When Josh Allen got to the league, he had horrible throwing accuracy because his footwork was bad. Those are some of the things that you can clean up with good coaching. Emphasis on good coaching. And again, I'm not saying he can be Josh Allen. We're just talking about what you can clean up to maximize your talent.
You know, to your point, none of these guys are a finished product. And that's what makes evaluating any of these NFL prospects difficult, because these guys continue to grow, continue to get better. I loved your comparison to Josh Allen, not comparing him necessarily as a player, but making the comparison of like, look where Josh Allen was his first couple years in the league and look at the player he became with coaching and with hard work. My number 3 quarterback is very, very dependent on what system and his development as well, because he's a guy that I think clearly has a lot of development, but also a ton of upside, and that's Jalen Milroe. I think this is a guy who's probably maybe the most polarizing quarterback in this class, the most physically gifted quarterback in the 2025 draft class. I don't even think that's debatable. This guy is an elite athlete. I started thinking about comps for this guy, and a lot of people have mentioned Jalen Hurts, and I get the comparison, but once I kind of dug a little deeper, and especially after what we saw at the Combine, the real comp is Lamar Jackson. When you look at the physical traits here, and we're talking about a guy who's 6'2", about 217 pounds. That's almost identical size to Lamar Jackson. They have almost identical hand size. Now, he ran a 4.37 at his pro day, which is unbelievable for a quarterback. We know Lamar Jackson, who didn't run a 40, would probably be in that same range. I think it's fair to say, Alex, he's probably a 4.3 guy as well. You look at the career completion percentage when Lamar was coming out of Louisville, only 57%. You look at Jalen Milroe, he's actually 64%. Now, he has a lot to clean up as a passer, don't get me wrong. But we have to remember, just like I mentioned a minute ago, about projecting what these guys could be. And I think it's safe to say nobody, probably the Ravens included, had any idea that Lamar Jackson would develop into the player he became. So I'm not saying Jalen Milroe will have that same path, but it's a very interesting comparison when you look at them, because you do see some flashes of elite play. The game tape, Alex, that really jumped out to me was that Georgia game. This guy could really be special. Now, he was just inconsistent. And there's other tape you throw on, like the Oklahoma game, really underwhelming. So you saw a lot of up and down with him. But the one thing I will say is his 2 years at Alabama as a starter, we've watched him take big steps forward. And even though every game isn't great and not every drive is always pretty, not every throw is perfect by any means, he's definitely got some holes. But this is a guy that just has tremendous upside. And I think at this point, when we kind of get past these first couple guys, I think the upside and the fact that you could kind of see the comparables to a guy like Lamar, and if there's I guess what I'm getting at is the upside, I think, is really immense. And I think if he's really properly developed, I could really see him maybe taking that next step and becoming a high-level player. I don't think he's ready to start year one by any means, but I think with the right coaching, the right system, the way the Ravens handled Lamar could almost be the perfect blueprint for a guy like this.
Okay, I'm going to say a name and nobody jump off the roof, right? Anthony Richardson. And what I mean by that is, when Anthony Richardson was coming out, what was that, Brad, 2 years ago? So when I say Anthony Richardson, I'm talking about him in that sense in terms of Jalen Milroe. He's not ready. Trust me, I do understand coming out when somebody tells you that you're going to be a top 5 pick, or perhaps Jalen Milroe can go in the second round, similar to, I guess, is probably why they're drawing that line between he and Jalen Hurts. The only difference is Jalen Hurts was in that Alabama system and then went to Oklahoma and then was able to show, I can also throw the ball, which boosted him up from probably being a 5th to 7th round pick if he was at Alabama to a 2nd round pick by Philly and now Super Bowl winner after with everything that organization put around him to be successful, which I think is to your point, where Jalen also sat as well before then he was worked in, and then they were using the running game to still develop him along the way. And I agree with you with Jalen Milroe, who's not, again, everybody that we're talking about besides Cam Ward and Shedeur, more than likely, I believe, will be in the second round or later, and perhaps Jalen Milroe comes in that back end of the second round. He's going to be able to go to a good team. He's going to be able to sit. Had he stayed with Caleb DeBoer, he probably has another year in that system where he can showcase and learn more. But alas, he's going to the NFL. So I agree with you, Brad, that there's huge upside here. He does have that big, huge arm. He can make all of the throws. The only difference is that why he's down is that he's not really good on those short passes. The 10 to 15 yard or let's say 5 to 12 yard, you make your bread and butter between those, let's just say 5 to 20 yard throws, and then maybe 4 to 5 times you get to throw something deep. So yeah, I think he needs to sit for maybe perhaps a year to maybe even 2 years to get that to the list, to take those reps in practice, and then him as an individual working on himself, because that was what, to your point about Lamar, that is what separated him, and we didn't see it come. We thought he'd be good. We didn't know he'd be this good. Jalen Milroe himself taking on the task of getting better as a thrower himself. If you got to go work with those quarterback coaches on the offseason, during season, to better yourself so that when it becomes your time, you get to go in and shine. But he's definitely a project, but he's a project with a huge upside.
My number 4 quarterback, Alex, is a guy that a lot of people, I think, are pushing up higher in this draft, and I had a really hard time finding where to rank this guy, because I'll be honest, I don't love this player's game, but I get why there's some upside here. And it's number 4 is Jackson Dart for me. And there's a lot of people, I've heard people in the media and some draft analysts that have came out and said there's a legit chance that he could get drafted ahead of Shedeur Sanders. I think that is crazy. I have a 3rd round grade on Jackson Dart. I think Jackson Dart is a lot closer to Kenny Pickett in that type of player, maybe a career backup type of player, than he is a franchise quarterback, which obviously if you're drafting in the top 2 or 3 picks, you're projecting a franchise quarterback. So just to make it clear, I think once you get past the first 2 guys, I have a 2nd round grade on Milroe. I have a 3rd round grade on Jackson Dart. That's how far this class starts to drop here. Now, I see some of the upside. When you watch the tape, I see some of the things that people like. He has really nice touch and timing, especially on the intermediate throws. I think he's a good athlete. I think he has enough speed where you can use him into some designed quarterback runs. He's pretty good at scrambling and creating extra time to throw. And we saw at Ole Miss, he's really, really good in the RPO game. We've seen the RPO game really catch on at the NFL level. I think what we saw from him at Ole Miss in that part of his game could absolutely translate at the next level. He's a guy who's very poised, he's very confident, and he thrives in those up-tempo situations, the 2-minute drills, the quick-tempo offense. I think he has an above-average arm. I wouldn't say an elite arm, but he's got a good arm. He can put some zip on it. He can make all the throws at all 3 levels. He's got a nice, quick, compact release. And he does have nice mechanics, NFL-ready mechanics. And, of course, once again, something that I think people are also looking at, 6'2", 225 pounds, kind of has, not a perfect prototype NFL build, but good NFL size. But there are some serious red flags with him. And I think he's really got to improve on layering the football. That is something that you have to be able to do at the NFL level. Shedeur does it at a high level. We've seen Cam Ward do it at a high level. I just don't see that enough from him on tape. His deep ball accuracy is really hit or miss. Sometimes he drops it in beautifully, and sometimes he's way off the mark. And I think the biggest thing, and this is something I've heard a lot of people say, and I think it's valid, he played in a very, very quarterback-friendly system with Lane Kiffin, with a lot of easy reads and predetermined reads. So he's not having to get through his progressions. He's not having to read defenses at any high level at all. And he tends to kind of lock in and stare down receivers. I think those are big red flags from a processing standpoint.
Okay. I don't like Jackson Dart at all. I don't like anything about Jackson Dart. He's nowhere in my top 5. He's not even in my top, he's not even in my top 7. I think Jackson Dart he's the one guy that they, and I use air quotes when I say they, have chosen as another guy that they're boosting up. To your point, Brad, like you said, there were talks of him, being taken, Shedeur sliding and Jackson Dart being taken ahead of him. I think anybody who takes Jackson Dart, unless you're telling me you have the next Andy Reid, Sean McVay, or Kyle Shanahan, is making a huge mistake. He is, to your point, like you said, you're looking at him projected as maybe a career backup. I don't have him on my list. I don't think he's a gamer. That Florida game, that was just despicable what happened in that Florida game. Listen, everybody has their faults, but going through his tape and looking at every single thing that I saw when he got into some of those games, I didn't feel his presence. Right? There were things that happened, games that are won. I just did not feel his presence. I didn't feel his impact. And those are some of the things that I like to feel. I mean, if you want another game, the Kentucky game was not a good game for him. I just simply think he's not ready at the next level to be a franchise player. But again, to be fair, and you have him in the third round, that's when you're starting to take if you're taking a quarterback in the third round, your idea is not for him to start, that he is now a developmental piece that you're going to have in your organization behind, let's just say the Giants take him, or even the Raiders take him, for argument's sake. You have a Geno Smith there for 3 years. You have 3 years to develop to see if he's a guy. Not that you're planning on him being that, but if he shows up and pops during practice and during his development over those 3 years, then you take a chance. I think he's going to be a career backup, which is why I have him at 7, because most of the guys that I'm looking at, that I have in my top 5, I see a potential that they could actually be a full-time starter.
It's the traits that people are falling in love with, the size, the athletic ability, the arm strength. I think people are looking at some of the wow plays and ignoring the ugly plays. And I should say the supporters out there, the people that are really high on him, that have him way up towards the top of this class, people that are saying he should be in the mix for a top 2, top 3 pick, those people that are saying that, I think are really overlooking some glaring red flags that we're talking about here. Now, our number 5 quarterback, and I say our because I'm actually pretty shocked by this, Alex. We had the same guy at number 5, and I'm telling you right now, if you scour the web and look at all these NFL draft analysts and all these websites and everybody that's putting out their quarterback rankings, I don't think anybody has this guy as high as we do. Now, he's on most people's top 10 list. I don't think he's on anybody's top 5 list, and I'm shocked, actually, that we both have him here at number 5. And Alex, that's Dylan Gabriel for Oregon.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's just talk the semantics around why he's perhaps, outside the top 5 in most of these, even though he has a lot of tape. He's been in school 6 years, started at UCF, then went to Oklahoma and ended up at Oregon and going on a run this year. But I think this is the this is the Kyler Murray bias, because a lot of us didn't know his actual size. We know what they say in college, but you always wait for the combine to get the official size. Some said 5'10". I've even heard as short as 5'9". Well, his official line is 5'11", so an inch shorter than 6 feet, and then perhaps in cleats he's 6 feet. That's number one. So once I got past that and saw the actual size by the combine, I'm like, okay, now I know how to grade this guy properly. And I believe we both have him graded properly at that top 5. Not only just what we saw at Oregon, but if you go to if we just start at his last 3 years between Oklahoma and Oregon, or even if you want to go to his, I guess I'll call it his quote unquote pop year, UCF at a sophomore, when he threw 32 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, you see what this guy can be. Then you go through COVID, you go through injury and so on and so forth. So you get the 6 year, and then now you see what he is at 3 different schools in 3 different offenses. He's just hit. He's just been a guy every single place that he has gone. And he also has the mobility. The only thing that I think was holding him back, because if Dylan Gabriel's 6'5", we're talking about a first-round pick, period. Without question, he's a first-round pick. But it's the fact that he had the height and so on and so forth that's been holding him back. And now that we have the official height and everything, he from now until the draft, he actually may move up my board. But I had to put him in my top 5 just based on production, going into 3 different offenses and being able to perform at a high level. Not just perform at a regular level, but perform at a high level. I hold that and saying, okay, this is a guy that perhaps in any offense I put him in, he can succeed and mix up my playbook with all of those plays because he's obviously can consume the playbook. And I think that's very important when you're coming in as a rookie quarterback.
Something that I think I really undervalued going into last year's draft was how big it is to have experience. It's not that I didn't value it, but I think I didn't bake it into my grades enough. And I think it's part of the reason why when you look at a guy like Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix, they both had so much success right out of the gate is because they had so much playing experience. And so to your point with Dylan Gabriel, I love that about his game, and I'm not going to undervalue it the same way I did last year because this is a guy that, like you said, has played in a bunch of different systems with a bunch of different coaches, with a bunch of different players. So I think that experience is absolutely huge. What I like about him from the physical standpoint, I love the compact, quick release. This guy has the quickest release in this entire draft. Boom, the ball is out quick out of his hand. Excellent footwork in the pocket. Great mechanics. I just love that tight, compact throwing motion that we see from him. And to the point about experience, really high level football IQ. Fast processing, pre and post snap, knows where to go with the football, makes good decisions. Now, the ball, just jumps off his hand. Noticeable zip, especially in the short and intermediate throws. He can really spin it in 25 yards and in. Shows a lot of zip and a lot of accuracy in that range. To your point, Alex, I think he's sneaky athletic. I don't think we saw a ton of it, especially at Oregon. He really played from the pocket a lot. But we've seen, if you watch the tape, this guy can extend plays when needed. And a lot of times he can pick up those first downs when the defense kind of forgets about him. He can pick up those 6 yards for a first down with his legs, or he can just roll out of the pocket and throw a dart, especially in the middle part of the field. He's really, really good. I think he shows really impressive anticipation and intelligence, played against so many different defenses. This is really valuable stuff because we have to remember, quarterback is still about what's above the shoulders. I think sometimes, like we were talking about, with Cam Ward and like I mentioned with Jackson Dart and even Jalen Milroe, I think sometimes we fall too much in love with the traits. And look, traits are important. Everybody wants a guy who's 6'4", 225 pounds, has a rocket arm. Everybody's looking for John Elway and Josh Allen. Everybody's looking for that guy. I get it. But we forget that it's still a mental game more than any other position. So I have a comp for him. And tell me what you think of this, Alex. My comp is Brock Purdy with a quicker release.
You know what? Yes, I can see that. I could definitely see that.
Yeah, not ideal height, not ideal weight, kind of similar to Brock Purdy, but had a ton of college experience, a ton of starting experience, processes at a high level, reads defenses at a high level, shows a lot of accuracy, a lot of timing, anticipation throws, similar to Brock Purdy, right? And shows nice accuracy and good decision making. And similar to Brock, Brock Purdy's sneaky athletic. There's times where you don't expect him to be able to move like he does, but he has nice mobility, can get out of the pocket, pick up first downs occasionally, or get out of the pocket and make a play downfield. Below NFL standards in height and weight, I think are really limiting his perceived upside, like you said, Alex. And I think when you look at his arm strength, I'd say B minus arm, Alex, when you watch the tape.
Yeah, I agree there. Yeah.
It's not terrible. I think, like I said, I think he has really nice zip, especially on the short and intermediate stuff. Doesn't have a cannon, but I think he has an adequate arm for NFL standards. And I think he's just going to be overlooked by some scouts because of the lack of elite physical traits. And I think that's why he's being pushed down a lot of these boards, despite the high-level intangibles that we're talking about here. I think teams that value, big athletic guys may not rank him as high, but I think the cerebral approach to this guy's game is really underrated.
Yeah, and I think that's why within a year to two sitting learning an offense, this is a guy that you'll be looking at and that'll be pushing whoever, obviously unless you have a Patrick Mahomes type, that he'll be pushing your starting quarterback for time or for his job, because he's ready to play. He's ready to play right now. Like I said, 6 years in, he's kind of seen everything. So he's ready to jump on the field. And I think whichever team grabs him, I guess between that 3rd and 5th round for the most part, is going to be pleasantly surprised when they get him in the building. He's going to be a leader on that field, and he's going to be able to make a lot of plays that they didn't think a rookie could come in and make right away.
Guys, if you enjoy the podcast, do us a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And guys, later this week, our next episode, we're going to discuss our top 20 big board. That's right. We're going to rank the top 20 players in this draft. It will be exclusively on YouTube. So be sure you subscribe over on YouTube so you don't miss that episode later this week. But once again, I'm Brad Fowler. He's Alex Higdon. This is Pint Glass Football, and we'll catch you next time.